Across the world, there are places where stone was shaped long before history learned how to record it, not as decoration, not as monuments to power, but as deliberate responses to death, water, movement, and belief. These structures were built without written plans or machines, yet they still control space, guide the body, and endure across thousands of years. Some rise from open plains, others are carved into cliffs or buried beneath the ground. All of them were placed with intention. In this documentary, we move through a series of ancient sites, examining what remains in stone and landscape rather than speculation or myth. Each chapter follows a structure as it exists today, allowing its form, placement, and endurance to reveal how early societies understood permanence. This is not a fast journey. It is a careful one. Stay with it, and let the stone speak. Mount Nokogiri. Mount Nokogiri rises along the coast of Chiba Prefecture in eastern Japan, facing Tokyo Bay, where steep cliffs descend sharply toward the sea and dense forests cover the upper slopes. From a distance, the mountain appears natural and untouched, but closer inspection reveals a landscape deeply shaped by human hands over many centuries. Archaeologically and historically, the site is identified as Mount Nokogiri, a mountain whose rock faces were extensively quarried and carved beginning in the early historic period of Japan. The name Nokogiri, meaning saw mountain, refers to the sharp, cut appearance left by large-scale stone extraction rather than to any natural formation. The mountain is composed primarily of soft volcanic tuff, a material easy to cut yet stable when shaped correctly. This geological feature made Nokogiri an ideal source of building stone for temples, walls, and infrastructure across the surrounding region. Quarrying here was not a short-term activity. It continued for generations, gradually reshaping the mountain itself. Stone was extracted directly from the cliff faces, leaving behind flat plains, sharp vertical cuts, and step terraces. These marks were not decorative. They are the physical record of labor, technique, and repeated use. The mountain became both resource and archive. As quarrying expanded, carved spaces were repurposed rather than abandoned. Empty faces and recesses became sites for religious expression, turning extraction zones into sacred landscapes. Over time, the mountain transformed from a working quarry into a place of ritual, devotion, and memory. One of the most striking features is the colossal seated stone Buddha, carved directly into the rock face. This figure was not transported or assembled. It was revealed by removing stone around it, a process that required precise planning and sustained effort. The Buddha remains embedded in the mountain, inseparable from it. Nearby, vertical cliff faces were carved with rows of stone figures, often identified as representations of Kannon, the Bodhisattva of compassion. These carvings line sheer drops, positioned where the landscape itself heightens awareness of scale, height, and vulnerability. The placement of these figures was deliberate. They were not meant to be approached casually. Access routes are narrow, elevated, and controlled, shaping how people moved through the site and how long they remained in certain spaces. The mountain's highest points provide expansive views across the bay, linking the site visually to distant shorelines and trade routes. This visibility reinforces the mountain's role as both landmark and boundary between land and sea. Mount Nokogiri does not follow the architectural logic of enclosed temples or planned complexes. Instead, it represents a carved landscape, where architecture emerges through subtraction rather than construction. Space is created by removal, not addition. This approach aligns with broader Japanese traditions that emphasize harmony with terrain rather than domination of it. The mountain was not flattened or replaced. It was reshaped incrementally, adapting existing forms to new purposes. The transition from quarry to sacred space reflects changing relationships with stone. What began as material extraction gradually accumulated symbolic meaning. Labor left behind surfaces that later generations interpreted, reused, and sanctified. The carved figures and terraces do not belong to a single moment in time. They were created, modified, weathered, and restored across centuries, layering meaning rather than replacing it. Unlike monumental stone sites built all at once, Mount Nokogiri records a slow process. Each cut, step, and carving marks a decision made within a specific historical context. Weather and erosion continued to affect the mountain. Stone surfaces soften, edges round, and details fade. This decay is part of the site's history rather than a failure of preservation. The mountain was never sealed or frozen in time. It remained open, used, and altered as beliefs and needs changed. What distinguishes Mount Nokogiri is the absence of a clear boundary between natural and built space. The mountain itself is the structure. Architecture here is inseparable from geology. Stone is not arranged into walls or towers. It is revealed, exposed, and shaped into surfaces that guide movement and perception. The site demonstrates how large-scale human modification can occur without erasing the identity of a landscape. Rather than imposing a new form, people worked within the mountain's existing character. Mount Nokogiri shows how architecture can emerge from repeated interaction rather than singular design. It preserves evidence of labor, belief, and adaptation layered into the same rock. The mountain does not tell one story, it holds many, overlapping and incomplete. Quarry marks coexist with sacred figures, workspaces become ritual paths, extraction becomes remembrance. This continuity challenges modern distinctions between industrial and sacred space. At Nokogiri, they are the same. The mountain remains standing not because it was protected, but because it was used. Its carved surfaces still shape how people move, look, and pause. Stone here does not separate past from present, it connects them. And as the first chapter of this journey, Mount Nokogiri sets the tone for what follows. Landscapes shaped slowly, deliberately, and repeatedly by human hands, where meaning accumulates not through monumentality alone, but through time. Oya Stone Quarry. The Oya Stone Quarry lies beneath the hills of Utsunomiya in Tochigi Prefecture, where the surface landscape gives little indication of the vast excavated space hidden below. Forests, fields, and ordinary roads pass overhead, while beneath them stretches an underground stone landscape carved slowly over centuries through repeated human labor. Archaeologically and historically, the site is known as the Oya Stone Quarry, a quarry complex formed through long-term extraction of Oya stone, a soft volcanic tuff created by ancient eruptions. This stone is lightweight, workable, and durable, qualities that made it valuable for construction throughout eastern Japan. Quarrying at Oya did not begin as a single-plan project. It expanded gradually, following veins of stone rather than architectural design. As blocks were removed, new chambers opened, and passages extended deeper into the earth. Over time, this process transformed a resource site into a vast, subterranean space. The quarry walls preserve the marks of tools used across different periods. Early hand tools left shallow grooves and uneven cuts, while later mechanized methods created straighter lines and broader surfaces. These marks form a layered record of a technological change rather than a uniform finish. Unlike built architecture, the quarry is defined by absence. Space exists where stone was taken away. Ceilings, pillars, and corridors remain only because removing them would have caused collapse. Structure here is determined by restraint as much as by effort. The underground chambers are tall and open, supported by massive stone columns left in place deliberately. These columns were not decorative. They were calculated supports, positioned to carry the weight of the earth above. Light within the quarry is minimal. Darkness dominates, softened only by artificial illumination in modern times. Historically, work would have been done under low light conditions, shaping the rhythm and pace of extraction. The air underground is cool and stable year-round. This consistency contrasts with the changing conditions on the surface and contributes to the quarry's preserved state. Oya stone extracted from this site was used in temples, storehouses, retaining walls, and later in modern buildings. Its presence spread quietly across towns and cities, embedding the quarry's labor into everyday architecture far from its source. The quarry itself, however, was never intended to be seen. It functioned as a working environment rather than a ceremonial space. Its scale emerged unintentionally, shaped by cumulative action rather than symbolic intent. As extraction continued, the underground space became increasingly complex. Passages intersected, chambers widened, and depth increased. Navigation required familiarity rather than signage. Knowledge of the quarry was held by workers rather than mapped formally. At certain points, quarrying ceased in specific areas, due to structural limits or changing demand. These abandoned chambers remained intact, sealed by neglect rather than closure. In the 20th century, large-scale quarrying declined. The underground space was no longer economically necessary, but its physical presence could not be undone. Stone once removed could not be replaced. What remained was a hidden architecture without architects, a space shaped by necessity rather than design. Later, parts of the quarry were rediscovered and repurposed. The underground chambers were recognized for their acoustic qualities and visual scale, transforming from industrial space into cultural site. This shift did not alter the quarry's form. It altered its interpretation. The walls still show extraction marks. Columns still carry weight. The space remains defined by removal rather than addition. Oya Stone Quarry demonstrates how human environments can emerge unintentionally through repeated practical decisions. No single generation planned the space as it exists today. Instead, each phase responded to immediate needs, extending, adjusting, and stopping where required. The quarry also challenges conventional definitions of architecture. There are no facades, no entrances designed for approach, no symbolic orientation. Yet the space has volume, proportion, rhythm, and structure. Its columns create aisles. Its chambers suggest halls. Its ceilings define height and scale. These qualities emerge naturally from the logic of extraction. Stone here is not arranged to express belief or power. It is shaped to be removed. And yet, the result carries a quiet monumentality. The quarry's silence is part of its character. Sound behaves differently underground, absorbed by stone rather than reflected outward. Movement through the space is slow and cautious, guided by darkness and uneven ground. The experience is inward rather than outward, contained rather than expansive. Oya Stone Quarry reveals how landscapes can be transformed beneath the surface without altering appearance above. It shows that some of the largest human-made spaces are hidden, not displayed. The quarry records labor rather than ceremony, effort rather than intention. Its endurance is accidental, preserved because it was abandoned rather than demolished. Stone here does not commemorate events or figures. It records work, and through that work, it preserves a long relationship between people, geology, and time. As the third chapter of this journey, Oya Stone Quarry expands the idea introduced at Mount Nokogiri and Nihonji, showing how stone landscapes can be shaped not only by devotion, but by necessity. It reminds us that some of the most powerful human-made spaces were never meant to be monuments. They became so simply by remaining. Turtle Stone, Kameshi. The Turtle Stone sits quietly in the village of Asuka in Nara Prefecture, an area known for its concentration of early Japanese stone monuments scattered across fields, gardens, and forest edges. Unlike monumental temples or fortified sites, this landscape does not announce its significance through scale or elevation. Its importance emerges through density and repetition. Archaeologically and culturally, the stone is known as kameshi, a large carved boulder whose surface has been shaped to resemble a turtle-like form. The stone dates to the Asuka period, roughly between the 6th and 7th centuries CE, a time of major political, religious, and technological transformation in Japan. The stone rests low to the ground, partially embedded in earth. It does not rise upward or dominate its surroundings. Its presence is horizontal and contained, encouraging close observation rather than distant viewing. The carved form is simple but deliberate. A rounded upper surface suggests a shell-like shape, while a protruding front resembles a head. Shallow grooves and channels are carved into the stone's surface, adding structure without clear explanation. The resemblance to a turtle is widely accepted, yet no historical record explains why this form was chosen or what function the stone originally served. The carving does not include inscriptions, symbols, or decorative motifs that clarify intent. This ambiguity is central to the stone's significance. The turtle holds symbolic meaning in East Asian cultures, often associated with longevity, stability, and cosmological order. However, whether these associations were intended at the time of carving or applied later remains uncertain. The stone's location offers few clues. It is not clearly aligned with celestial events, waterways, or surrounding monuments. It does not mark a boundary or enclosure. It exists as an isolated form within a broader stone landscape. Tool marks visible on the surface indicate deliberate shaping rather than natural erosion. The stone was worked with care, but not polished to refinement. The finish is functional rather than ornamental. The grooves carved into the stone may have served a practical purpose, possibly related to water flow, drainage, or ritual use involving liquids. Alternatively, they may be symbolic, marking divisions or directions without functional intent. No definitive interpretation has been established. The turtle stone belongs to a wider group of enigmatic stone carvings in the Osca region, many of which share similar characteristics. Large boulders were shaped, cut, and positioned without clear architectural context, suggesting a local tradition of stone modification that did not rely on buildings or enclosures. This tradition differs from later Japanese architecture, which emphasized timber construction and impermanent materials. In Osca, stone appears briefly as a primary medium before receding again. The effort required to carve the turtle stone would have been substantial, but not extreme. It represents a focused investment rather than a monumental undertaking. This scale suggests that the stone was meaningful within a specific social or ritual framework, rather than serving a public or state-level function. The stone does not guide movement or define space. People do not pass through it or around it as part of a structured path. Interaction is observational rather than participatory. Over time, the stone became integrated into local memory rather than official history. Stories, names, and associations accumulated without replacing uncertainty. The surrounding landscape changed. Fields were cultivated, paths shifted, buildings rose and fell. The stone remained in place. Its survival owes less to protection than to irrelevance. It was not repurposed, dismantled, or built over. This accidental preservation allows the stone to retain its original ambiguity. The turtle stone challenges conventional ideas of architecture and monumentality. It is not a structure, a marker, or a sculpture in the usual sense. It does not enclose space. It does not commemorate an event. It does not declare authority. Instead, it exists as a shaped presence, defined by what it does not explain. This quality places it closer to landscape intervention than architecture, closer to gesture than construction. The stone records a moment when stone carving was used not to build upward or inward, but to suggest form. Meaning here is implied rather than stated. The turtle stone does not demand interpretation. It resists it. Visitors approach, observe, and leave without resolution. The experience is brief but persistent. The stone's continued presence suggests that explanation is not required for significance to endure. As part of the Osca stone landscape, the turtle stone reinforces the pattern seen across early Japan, where stone was used experimentally, then largely abandoned in favor of other materials. This brief moment left behind objects that do not fit neatly into later traditions. They remain as questions rather than answers. The turtle stone does not speak through grandeur or complexity. It speaks through restraint, through the decision to carve just enough and then stop. As the fifth chapter of this journey, the turtle stone deepens the theme established by earlier sites. Landscapes shaped by selective intervention. Stone modified not to dominate space, but to mark it quietly. It reminds us that some ancient works survived not because they were understood, but because they were left alone. The turtle stone remains low, still, and unresolved. Its form endures. Its meaning stays open. And in that openness, it continues to hold attention long after the hands that shaped it disappeared. Turtle tombs of Japan. Across parts of central Japan, particularly in regions connected to early state formation, there exist burial mounds whose outlines were shaped deliberately to resemble turtles. These are often referred to collectively as turtle tombs, or turtle-shaped kofun, and they belong to a broader funerary tradition that used landscape and form to communicate meaning without written explanation. Archaeologically, these tombs are grouped under the category of turtle-shaped kofun, constructed mainly during the late Kofun period, between the 6th and early 7th centuries CE. They appeared during a time when political authority, cosmology, and continental influence were increasingly intertwined in Japan. Unlike simple round or keyhole-shaped kofun, turtle tombs introduce intentional symbolism into the shape of the mound itself. From above, the outline suggests a broad shell-like body with an extended projection resembling a head. This form was not accidental. It required careful planning, earth movement, and shaping at a scale visible only when viewed across distance or elevation. The turtle holds deep symbolic meaning in East Asian cosmology. It's associated with longevity, stability, protection, and the ordering of the world. In some traditions, the turtle supports the cosmos itself, linking earth, water, and sky. Embedding this symbolism into burial architecture suggests that these tombs were not only places of interment, but statements about continuity, endurance, and authority beyond death. The tombs were constructed primarily from earth, with internal stone chambers built to house the deceased. These chambers were often similar in technique to those seen in other elite kofun, using large stone slabs arranged to form enclosed burial spaces. Access corridors guided movement inward, separating the living landscape from the interior space of the dead through controlled transition. Once sealed, these chambers were not intended for repeated entry. The external shaping of the mound required sustained labor. Earth was piled, compacted, and carved into form, with slopes adjusted to maintain stability and visual clarity. This work was not visible once complete, but its results were unmistakable. The turtle shape would have been most apparent to those overseeing construction and those familiar with the site, reinforcing meaning through shared knowledge rather than public display. These tombs were not scattered randomly. They appear in regions associated with emerging political elites, suggesting that the form carried status and authority rather than serving common burial practice. Unlike Ishibutai Kofun, where meaning is expressed through exposed stone, turtle tombs communicate through silhouette and symbolism. Their power lies in outline rather than material. The choice to encode meaning into shape rather than decoration reflects a broader pattern in early Japanese architecture, where symbolism often operates at the level of layout, orientation, and landscape integration. The turtle tombs were originally covered with vegetation and earth, blending into their surroundings rather than standing apart as stone monuments. Visibility came from form, not height. Over time, erosion softened their outlines. Agricultural use altered surfaces. In many cases, only partial shapes remain legible today. Yet even in degraded form, the intention behind their design is still detectable. The tombs reflect a worldview in which burial architecture was not only about honoring the dead, but about embedding cosmological order into the land itself. The deceased was not isolated underground. They became part of a symbolic structure linking life, time, and continuity. These mounds also mark a transitional phase. Shortly after, Japan's burial practices shifted, and large coffin construction declined as new religious and political systems took hold. The turtle tombs therefore belong to a brief but significant moment, when symbolism, authority, and landscape were tightly integrated. They are not experimental in the way earlier Asuka stone carvings appear, nor are they purely functional. They represent a mature symbolic language expressed through earth rather than stone. The labor invested in shaping these mounds reflects centralized organization, even if written records are absent. Meaning was built into form, not explained. The turtle tombs do not instruct visitors how to interpret them. They assume shared understanding. As centuries passed, that understanding faded, leaving behind shapes whose significance must now be reconstructed archaeologically rather than remembered culturally. The tombs survive because they were too large to erase easily, yet too quiet to attract constant attention. They remain embedded in fields, hillsides, and forests, their outlines partially hidden but not lost. These burial mounds remind us that early architecture did not rely on walls or columns to communicate ideas. Sometimes meaning was carried by shape alone. The turtle tombs show how a landscape itself became language. They demonstrate that early societies could express cosmology, authority, and permanence without inscriptions or monuments of stone. Earth was enough. Form was enough. As the seventh chapter of this journey, the turtle tombs deepen the exploration of how ancient Japan used material, shape, and restraint to encode meaning into the land. They show that memory was not always carved. Sometimes it was shaped, and even as their outlines soften with time, the idea behind them continues to remain, quietly embedded in the ground. Gavrinis. Gavrinis lies on a small island in the Gulf of Morbihan, off the coast of Brittany in western France, surrounded by calm tidal waters that rise and fall with steady rhythm. Today, the island feels quiet and isolated, but during the Neolithic period, it was closely connected to the mainland, part of a coastal landscape shaped by movement, navigation, and seasonal change. Archaeologically, the monument is identified as Gavrinis, a passage grave constructed around 3400 BCE, during a period when stone monument building had already reached a high level of technical and symbolic sophistication in Atlantic Europe. Gavrinis does not rely on size or visibility alone. Its significance lies within. From the outside, the monument appears as a low stone cairn, rounded and compact, blending into the island's surface rather than rising above it. The structure does not announce itself dramatically. Its presence becomes clear only upon approach. A narrow stone passage leads inward, cutting through the cairn toward a small burial chamber at its center. The passage is low and enclosed, forcing slow, deliberate movement. This restriction shapes experience from the first step, separating exterior space from interior meaning through controlled motion rather than abrupt transition. The walls of the passage are formed from large upright stone slabs. These stones are not plain. Nearly every visible surface is carved with intricate engravings, spirals, curves, chevrons, axes, and abstract forms that flow across the stone in continuous patterns. These carvings are among the most complex and densely packed examples of Neolithic stone art in Europe. They are not random decorations. They are placed precisely where the body passes, where hands brush stone, where light fades gradually as one moves inward. The carvings do not depict people or animals in any literal sense. They communicate through abstraction rather than representation. Meaning is suggested, not stated. Some motifs repeat across multiple stones, while others appear only once. Lines curve, intersect, and loop back on themselves, creating visual movement within an otherwise static space. Light plays a limited role inside the passage. As daylight recedes, the carvings become harder to see, forcing closer attention. The experience becomes tactile as much as visual. At the end of the passage lies the burial chamber, constructed from larger slabs and capped by a single massive stone. This capstone is itself carved, its underside engraved with patterns that would only be visible from within the chamber. This placement suggests that the carvings were not meant for public display. They were meant to be encountered under specific conditions, by those who entered deliberately. The chamber was used for burial, though human remains found here were limited. This suggests that Gavrinis may not have been a tomb in the conventional sense, but a ritual space associated with burial rather than focused on it. The monument's orientation aligns with the movement of the sun at certain times of year, allowing light to penetrate the passage briefly. These moments would have been rare and controlled, reinforcing the sense of timing and return. One of the most striking discoveries about Gavrinis is that some of its carved stones were reused from earlier monuments. Broken pieces of large standing stones, including parts of massive menhirs, were repurposed as passage slabs. The carvings on these stones sometimes continue across breaks, indicating that they once formed part of a single, much larger carved surface. This reuse reveals an architectural practice rooted in continuity rather than replacement. Older monuments were not erased, they were absorbed. Stone here carries memory physically. Past structures are embedded within new ones, their meaning transformed but not lost. The labor required to build Gavrinis was substantial. Stones were quarried, transported by water, carved, erected, and then enclosed beneath the cairn. Each stage required planning and coordination, yet the result is not ostentatious. The monument conceals its effort beneath earth and stone. The island location adds another layer of meaning. Reaching Gavrinis would have required crossing water, reinforcing separation between everyday space and ritual destination. The journey itself became part of the experience. Unlike later monumental architecture that seeks visibility from afar, Gavrinis rewards proximity and patience. It does not reveal itself all at once. It unfolds slowly. The carvings do not explain themselves. They invite sustained attention without resolution. Interpretations vary. Some see symbolic maps, others ritual language, others expressions of cosmology. None can be proven conclusively. This uncertainty is not a failure of understanding. It is part of the monument's design. Gavrinis does not transmit a single message. It creates a condition for meaning. The monument survived because it was sealed. The cairn protected the interior from weather, preserving carvings that might otherwise have eroded. When rediscovered and excavated, the interior emerged almost intact, revealing a Neolithic world preserved in shadow. Gavrinis shows how early societies combined engineering, art, and landscape into unified architectural expression. Stone was not only structural, it was communicative. The passage functions as both corridor and narrative, guiding the body while engaging the senses. This integration of movement, surface, and enclosure represents a peak moment in Neolithic monument design. The builders of Gavrinis were not experimenting blindly. They were refining a tradition already centuries old. The monument reflects confidence, repetition, and shared understanding. It was built to be revisited, not consumed at once, meaning accumulated through return. As the 8th chapter of this journey, Gavrinis deepens the exploration of how ancient societies used stone to encode memory without words. Here, architecture does not dominate through mass or height. It draws inward. It slows time, It asks attention rather than obedience. Gavrini's remains closed in form but open in meaning, holding carved stone surfaces that still resist full interpretation. And in that resistance, it continues to speak, quietly, deliberately, and without conclusion. Rock-cut tombs of Beni Hassan. The rock-cut tombs of Beni Hassan are carved into the eastern limestone cliffs overlooking the Nile Valley in Middle Egypt, where the river narrows and the desert rises sharply from cultivated land. The contrast between fertile floodplain and barren rock is immediate, creating a natural division between life sustained by water below and the permanence of stone above. Archaeologically, the site is identified as Beni Hassan, a cemetery complex dating primarily to the Middle Kingdom of Egypt around the 20th to 19th centuries BCE. These tombs were constructed not for pharaohs, but for provincial governors and officials who governed Egypt's regional districts during a period of administrative consolidation. The tombs are arranged in horizontal rows cut directly into the cliff face, positioned high above the valley floor. This elevation was not accidental. It separated the dead from daily life while maintaining visual connection to the land they once governed. Each tomb follows a consistent architectural logic. A broad entrance opens into a columned hall carved entirely from living rock. Stone columns rise from the floor, their forms echoing wooden architecture used in domestic and temple buildings below. What was once built in timber is here translated into stone. The interiors are not narrow or claustrophobic. They are open, orderly spaces designed to receive visitors rather than seal them out. These tombs were meant to be entered, revisited, and maintained. Walls inside the tombs are covered with painted scenes depicting daily activities such as agriculture, hunting, craft production, athletic contests, and foreign interaction. These images do not glorify conquest or divine kingship. They record ordinary life with precision and restraint. The paintings are not symbolic abstractions, they are observational. Clothing, tools, gestures, and posture are rendered carefully, suggesting close attention to lived experience. Several tombs, scenes show interactions with people from outside Egypt, including traders and migrants. These images provide rare visual evidence of cross-cultural contact during the Middle Kingdom. The presence of such scenes indicates that these tombs were not merely spaces of remembrance, but statements of identity. They present the tomb owner as administrator, organizer, and participant in a broader world. Unlike royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, Beni Hassan emphasizes social order rather than divine destiny. Authority is expressed through management and stability rather than cosmic drama. Architecturally, the tombs rely entirely on subtraction. Stone was removed to create space, columns, ceilings, and relief surfaces. Once cut, nothing could be corrected or replaced. Every decision was permanent. The ceilings are flat and carefully leveled. Columns are evenly spaced. Proportions are measured rather than monumental. The spaces reflect control and discipline rather than excess. Light enters the tombs through wide entrances, illuminating interior walls for much of the day. This allowed painted scenes to remain visible and legible, reinforcing the tomb's role as a space for visitation. These were not sealed chambers meant to remain unseen. They were designed for interaction between the living and the dead. Burial shafts descend from the main halls into deeper chambers where the bodies were placed. These shafts separate ritual space from physical interment, allowing the tomb to function symbolically without exposing the burial itself. The tomb owners invested heavily in surface treatment rather than structural complexity. The rock provided stability. Meaning was added through imagery and layout. The choice of cliff carving reflects both practicality and belief. Limestone here was accessible and workable, allowing large spaces to be created efficiently while ensuring long-term preservation. At the same time, carving into the cliff reinforced permanence. The tombs became part of the landscape itself, resistant to flooding, agriculture, and later construction. Beni Hassan represents a shift in Egyptian funerary architecture. Rather than constructing pyramids or mastabas from separate materials, elites here embedded memory directly into the terrain. This approach allowed repetition. Dozens of tombs follow similar patterns, reinforcing administrative consistency across generations. Despite this uniformity, individual tombs vary in decoration and emphasis, reflecting personal status and regional identity within a centralized system. Over time, the cemetery fell out of active use. Sand and debris accumulated, partially obscuring entrances. Paintings faded but did not disappear. The tombs survived largely because they were cut into stone rather than built upon the surface. What could not be dismantled was left alone. Modern study revealed the extraordinary detail preserved within these spaces. The tombs provide one of the most complete visual records of Middle Kingdom life. They document work, leisure, discipline, and social order without relying on monumental propaganda. Stone here functions as archive rather than spectacle. The architecture does not overwhelm. It organizes. The cliff face becomes a ledger of governance, labor, and memory. Movement through the tombs is calm and controlled. Visitors pass from bright exterior into shaded interior, guided by columns and walls rather than corridors and doors. The experience mirrors the social order the tombs depict: open, regulated, and stable. Beni Hassan does not seek mystery. It offers clarity, yet within that clarity lies restraint. There is no attempt to dramatize death or afterlife. The focus remains on continuity. The tombs preserve a vision of society balanced between permanence and practicality. They show how architecture can record administration as effectively as belief. Stone here does not separate life from death completely. It links them. The cliffs still overlook the Nile, unchanged in position even as civilizations rose and fell below. The tombs remain embedded in the rock, holding scenes of a world carefully observed and deliberately remembered. As the 9th chapter of this journey, Beni Hassan shifts the focus from symbolic stone to documentary stone, showing how architecture became a medium for recording human order rather than asserting divine power. It reveals a moment when stone was used not to overwhelm time, but to organize it. And through these carved halls and painted walls, the rhythm of Middle Kingdom Egypt continues to remain visible, quiet, and precise. Dolmen de la Roche aux Fées. The Dolmen de la Roche aux Fées stands in eastern Brittany, near the edge of open farmland, where the land rises gently, and the horizon remains wide and unobstructed. There's no dramatic elevation, no natural enclosure, no obvious reason for a monument of this scale to exist here, and yet it does, grounded firmly in the landscape. Archaeologically, the site is identified as Dolmen de la Roche aux Fées, one of the largest and best preserved Neolithic passage tombs in Europe. It was constructed around 3000 BCE, during a period when megalithic building traditions had already spread widely along the Atlantic coast. From the outside, the monument appears as a long, low stone structure, stripped of the earthen mound that once covered it. What remains is the stone skeleton itself, a sequence of upright slabs supporting massive capstones, forming a straight passage aligned with remarkable consistency. The structure extends for more than 40 meters, composed of approximately 40 large stones, some weighing over 40 tons. These blocks were not sourced from the immediate surroundings. They were transported from quarries several kilometers away, moved without wheels, metal tools, or draft animals. The scale of this effort is difficult to grasp when standing beside the stones. Each block represents coordination, planning, and repeated labor carried out over long periods of time. This was not a short-term project. It was a commitment. The passage is narrow and linear, guiding movement forward without deviation. There are no side chambers, no branching paths, no decorative elements to distract from progression. The architecture insists on direction. As one moves through the passage, the stone walls close in slightly, and the ceiling lowers in places. The experience becomes controlled and measured, shaping posture and pace. Architecture here is not passive. It governs the body. At the far end of the passage lies the terminal chamber, wider and more enclosed than the corridor leading to it. This chamber marks arrival rather than climax. There's no sudden expansion, no visual spectacle. The transition is subtle. Unlike sites such as Gavrinis, the stones at Roche aux Fées are not carved with visible decoration. Their surfaces are largely plain, marked only by natural texture and weathering, meaning here is not carried through imagery. It is carried through form. The alignment of the monument is deliberate. The passage is oriented toward the winter solstice sunset, allowing light to enter the corridor at a specific time of year. This event would have been brief and predictable, reinforcing the connection between architecture, time, and seasonal cycle. Such alignment suggests that the monument was not only a place of burial, but a device for marking temporal order. Stone fixed time in place. The original earthen mound that covered the structure would have concealed much of the stonework, emphasizing interior experience over exterior appearance. The monument was not designed to impress from a distance. It was designed to be entered. The removal of the mound in later centuries exposed the skeletal form we see today, changing how the monument is perceived, but not how it was built. Excavations indicate that the site was used for burial, though remains were fragmentary, suggesting collective use rather than individual commemoration. The dead were placed, moved, and possibly rearranged over time. This repeated use transformed the monument into a space of continuity rather than finality. It was not sealed after a single event. The uniformity of construction suggests shared knowledge and tradition rather than experimentation. The builders knew how to place stones of this scale safely and consistently. There's no evidence of collapse or major structural failure. The monument stands because it was built with restraint. Each capstone rests securely across multiple uprights, distributing weight evenly. The design prioritizes stability over ambition. The choice to build such a long passage rather than a tall structure reflects a different conception of monumentality. Power is expressed horizontally rather than vertically. The monument stretches across the land instead of rising above it. Local folklore later attributed the site to fairies, giants, or supernatural beings, a common response to structures whose scale exceeds familiar explanation. These stories reflect awe, not origin. The real achievement lies not in myth, but in organization. The Dolmen de la Roche au Fay required coordination across a community, knowledge passed through practice, and commitment sustained beyond individual lifetimes. It reflects a society capable of planning beyond immediate survival. The monument's simplicity is deceptive. There is no ornament to distract from structure. Nothing is hidden. Stone is doing exactly what it was placed to do. The experience of the monument is slow. One doesn't rush through it. Movement is deliberate, framed by weight and enclosure. Sound is absorbed by stone. Light shifts gradually. Time feels altered. This controlled environment would have reinforced ritual behavior, separating everyday life from ceremonial action. The dolmen does not explain itself. It does not instruct through symbols or images. It operates through presence and alignment. The builders did not leave records. They left architecture, and that architecture still performs its function, channeling movement, light, and attention. The monument remains exposed to sky and weather, its stones marked by centuries of erosion, yet its form persists. It stands not because it was protected, but because it was balanced. The Dolmen de la Roche au Fay demonstrates a mature phase of Neolithic monument building, where scale, orientation, and restraint converged into a single coherent structure. Stone here does not dominate the land. It organizes it. As the 10th chapter of this journey, Roche au Fay reinforces the idea that ancient architecture often achieved power through discipline rather than display. It shows how meaning can be built into alignment and proportion without reliance on decoration. The monument remains open, silent, and unresolved. It does not demand explanation. It invites return. And through that invitation, it continues to shape how time, movement, and memory intersect within the landscape, long after the people who built it are gone. Temple of Baal, Temple of Bel, Palmyra. The Temple of Baal once stood at the heart of Palmyra, an oasis city positioned between the Mediterranean world and Mesopotamia, where desert routes converged into corridors of trade, movement, and exchange. The surrounding landscape is open and arid, defined by distance rather than enclosure. Here, architecture did not compete with the land, it created order within it. Archaeologically, the monument is identified as Temple of Bel, constructed in the 1st century CE and dedicated to Bel, a Semitic deity later associated with Baal. The temple complex was not simply a religious structure. It was a civic and cosmological center that reflected Palmyra's role as an intermediary between cultures. The temple stood within a vast walled precinct, a rectangular enclosure that defined sacred space through boundary rather than height. From the outside, the enclosure appeared restrained. Its scale became apparent only upon entry. Inside, a large open courtyard stretched across the center, framed by colonnades that guided movement without enclosing it fully. This openness was deliberate. Ritual here occurred under the sky, with architecture shaping space rather than sealing it off. At the heart of the complex stood the temple building itself, raised on a platform and approached through controlled access points. Unlike Greek temples designed to be viewed primarily from the exterior, This structure emphasized interior function and ritual use. The architectural language of the temple reflects synthesis rather than imitation. Classical Greco-Roman columns, capitals, and proportions coexist with Near Eastern spatial concepts and religious traditions. This blending was not decorative. It reflected Palmyra's position as a cultural crossroads. The temple's inner sanctuary contained spaces oriented toward ritual rather than congregation. Access was restricted, reinforcing separation between public sacred space and inner religious function. Stone blocks used in construction were large and precisely cut, assembled with care rather than ornament. Decoration existed, but it did not dominate. Structure carried authority. The orientation of the complex was deliberate, aligned with cosmological principles and urban layout, rather than dramatic landscape features. The temple did not seek elevation or isolation. It occupied the city's center. This placement reinforced its role as stabilizing force rather than distant shrine. The cult of Bel combined local Semitic traditions with broader imperial religious frameworks. Ritual practice here was layered, accommodating multiple interpretations rather than enforcing uniform belief. Architecture supported this inclusivity. The large courtyard allowed gathering without imposing a single ritual narrative. Movement through the complex was gradual. Entry, passage, and approach were sequenced, slowing the body and focusing attention. The walls of the precinct were massive, yet they did not function as fortifications. They marked transition rather than defense. Inside the enclosure, the scale shifted from expansive to contained, guiding experience inward. The temple's durability reflected both material quality and political stability. For centuries, it remained active, maintained, and adapted without fundamental redesign. Additions and repairs respected the original layout, reinforcing continuity rather than replacement. The temple was not isolated from daily life. Markets, streets, and civic buildings surrounded it. Sacred and secular space overlapped. This integration reflects a worldview in which religion was embedded within social structure rather than separated from it. Stone here was used to regulate behavior, not to overwhelm it. The temple did not dominate the skyline. It organized the city. Over time, as political control shifted and religious systems changed, the temple's function evolved. It was reused, modified, and eventually abandoned. Its survival into the modern era owed much to its construction. Large stone blocks resist erosion, reuse, and collapse. The later destruction of parts of the temple did not erase its presence. Foundations, columns, and layout remain legible. Even in ruin, the temple's spatial logic is clear. The courtyard still defines openness. The sanctuary still marks inward focus. The walls still frame transition. The Temple of Baal demonstrates how ancient architecture could absorb multiple identities without losing coherence. It was not built to assert dominance through height or isolation. It was built to anchor community within space and time. Stone here functioned as mediator between cultures, beliefs, and movement. The temple's design allowed ritual to adapt while architecture remained stable. This flexibility explains its long life. The monument does not rely on mystery or scale to command attention. Its power comes from proportion, placement, and restraint. The Temple of Baal shows how sacred architecture can be both inclusive and controlled, open and ordered. It records a moment when belief, trade, and an empire intersected without forcing uniformity. As the 11th chapter of this journey, the Temple of Baal marks a shift from prehistoric stone to urban stone, from communal monument to civic center. It reveals how architecture evolved to support complexity rather than resolve it. Stone here does not answer questions. It holds them. And even in partial ruin, the temple continues to shape space, memory, and understanding, standing as a reminder that some of the most enduring structures were built not to dominate the world, but to connect it. The city of Petra. Royal tombs. The royal tombs of Petra rise from the sandstone cliffs on the eastern side of the ancient city, where the rock face opens into a wide valley shaped by water, wind, and centuries of movement. Unlike hidden burial chambers or enclosed cemeteries, these tombs are fully exposed, carved directly into sheer cliff walls that dominate the surrounding landscape. Archaeologically, the site belongs to Petra, the capital of the Nabatean kingdom, which flourished between the 1st century BCE and the 2nd century CE. Petra was not built in stone blocks stacked upward. It was carved inward, transforming cliffs into architecture through removal rather than construction. The royal tombs represent the most monumental expression of this approach. They are not a single structure, but a group of large tomb facades aligned along the rock face, each carved with distinct architectural features that reflect status, influence, and adaptation. These tombs include what are commonly referred to as the urn tomb, the silk tomb, the Corinthian tomb, and the palace tomb. Their names are modern labels, based on visual characteristics rather than original function or inscription. Each facade presents an architectural language that blends Nabatean tradition with Hellenistic and Roman influence. Columns, pediments, niches, and cornices are carved directly into sandstone, imitating built architecture while remaining inseparable from the cliff itself. The scale of these facades is striking. Some rise more than 20 meters high, yet they were carved from top to bottom, requiring precise planning before any stone was removed. Once carving began, mistakes could not be reversed. Workers would have suspended themselves on ropes or scaffolding, cutting into vertical rock surfaces using hand tools. This labor demanded not only strength, but control and foresight. The interiors of the tombs are comparatively restrained. Large, simple chambers lie behind the elaborate facades, emphasizing that the external display carried social meaning, while the interior served functional burial purposes. This contrast reveals a key feature of Nabatean funerary architecture. Identity and status were communicated outward, toward the living city, rather than inward toward the dead. The tombs are positioned to be seen from major processional routes within Petra. Their placement ensured visibility, embedding memory and authority into the daily movement of the city. Unlike pyramids or mastabas that separate the dead from urban life, Petra's royal tombs integrate burial directly into the city's fabric. The choice of sandstone as medium shaped every aspect of design. The stone's softness allowed intricate carving, while its layered coloration created natural visual variation. The facades appear to shift color throughout the day as light moves across the cliff. This changing appearance adds temporal dimension to the architecture. The tombs do not look the same at all times. They respond to light, shadow, and weather. Despite their scale, the tombs are not symmetrical as a group. Each facade follows its own proportions and decorative scheme, suggesting individual commissions rather than centralized planning. This individuality reflects Nabatean society, where elite families express status through architectural patronage rather than standardized royal monuments. The absence of extensive inscriptions limits certainty about who was buried in each tomb. Titles, names, and genealogies are largely absent, leaving architecture to speak where text does not. The tombs were sealed after burial, but they were not hidden. Their facades remained active elements of the urban landscape. Over time, some tombs were reused, modified, or adapted for new purposes, including religious and residential use during later periods. This reuse reflects continuity rather than abandonment. Petra itself was shaped by trade. The city controlled routes linking Arabia, the Mediterranean, and Mesopotamia. Wealth flowed through movement rather than conquest. The royal tombs express this position. Their architecture is hybrid, combining styles without fully adopting any single tradition. They don't replicate Greek temples or Roman basilicas. They reinterpret them within a carved rock context. The tomb facades suggest permanence, but they are also vulnerable. Sandstone erodes, details soften, edges wear down. This erosion does not erase form. It alters it gradually, reinforcing the idea that Petra's architecture exists in dialogue with time rather than resistance to it. The royal tombs also demonstrate how monumental scale can be achieved without transporting stone. All material remains in place. The mountain itself becomes the monument. This method contrasts sharply with megalithic traditions that rely on movement and assembly. Here, absence creates presence. The cliff face becomes a facade. The city becomes a cemetery. The dead overlook the living. This relationship between life and death is not hidden or avoided. It is integrated. The tombs face outward, not inward. They engage with space rather than withdraw from it. Standing before them, one does not enter immediately. The scale encourages distance first, then approach. The facades command attention without enclosing the viewer. They remain open, visible, and unresolved. The royal tombs mark a moment when funerary architecture became urban architecture, when memory was placed directly into the city's visual field. They don't rely on mystery to endure. They rely on placement. Stone here does not isolate death. It situates it. As the 12th chapter of this journey, Petra's royal tombs expand the exploration of stone from burial chambers and ritual passages into full civic display. They show how carving, rather than building, could express power, identity, and continuity. They remind us that some cities were not constructed upward, but inward. And through these carved cliffs, Petra continues to stand as a city shaped by absence, endurance, and deliberate human choice, long after the voices that commissioned these tombs have fallen silent. Myshaweh. Myshaweh stands at the heart of mainland Orkney, set within a broad, open landscape where low hills, lochs, and distant stone monuments define the horizon. The land here is exposed to wind and weather, with little shelter and few trees, creating an environment where human presence is immediately visible against the terrain. Archaeologically, the monument is identified as Myshaweh, a Neolithic chambered cairn constructed around 2800 BCE. It is one of the most precisely engineered stone monuments of prehistoric Europe, not because of scale alone, but because of control over space, light, and movement. From the outside, Mysho appears as a large grass-covered mound, rising gently from the plain. There's no exposed stone facade, no immediate indication of the complexity contained within. The structure does not announce itself through ornament or height. Its presence is defined by volume and placement. A single narrow passage cuts through the mound, extending for nearly 10 meters toward the center. The passage is low and confined, forcing anyone who enters to bend and slow their movement. This physical adjustment marks the transition from open landscape to enclosed interior. The passage leads into a central stone chamber constructed from carefully fitted sandstone blocks. The chamber is tall, box-like, and balanced, with corbelled walls rising inward toward a flat stone roof. The geometry is deliberate. Each stone contributes to stability rather than decoration. 3 smaller side cells open from the central chamber, arranged symmetrically. These cells were likely used for placing human remains, though the quantity of bones recovered suggests selective or symbolic burial rather than continuous use. The interior space feels controlled and measured. Sound is muted. Light is limited. The chamber was not designed for gathering large groups. It was designed for presence. Mysho's most remarkable feature is its alignment with the winter solstice. At sunset on the shortest days of the year, light travels down the length of the passage and briefly illuminates the back wall of the central chamber. This alignment is precise. It could not have been accidental. Achieving it required long-term observation of solar movement and careful planning during construction. The effect lasts only a short time, reinforcing the importance of timing and return rather than continuous visibility. Light enters the chamber only when the year reaches its turning point. This moment connects architecture directly to seasonal cycle. Stone fixes time into place. Unlike monuments that rely on imagery or carving, Mysho communicates through alignment and enclosure. There are no Neolithic decorations on the walls. Meaning is created through spatial experience rather than visual symbols. The monument sits within a wider ceremonial landscape that includes standing stones, henges, and other chambered cairns. Mysho does not stand alone. It anchors a network. Its position relative to nearby monuments suggests deliberate placement within a broader ritual system, rather than isolated construction. The cairn was built using local stone, quarried and transported short distances. While the material is accessible, the organization required to assemble it was not simple. Each block was shaped enough to fit securely, but not smoothed excessively. Precision here serves structure, not appearance. The cairn was originally sealed, its interior protected from weather and disturbance. This sealing preserved the chamber for millennia. When the monument was breached in later periods, new marks were added to the walls. Viking runic inscriptions, carved centuries after construction, cover parts of the interior. These inscriptions record names, boasts, and brief messages left by Norse visitors who entered the chamber during the medieval period. Their presence demonstrates how Mysho remained significant long after its original purpose faded. The monument continued to attract attention, curiosity, and interaction. The Norse carvings do not overwrite the Neolithic structure. They coexist with it, adding another layer of human presence rather than replacing earlier meaning. This layered history transforms Mysho from a single-period monument into a continuous point of return. The cairn does not rely on narrative explanation. Its function is experienced rather than described. Movement through the monument is slow. Entry requires effort. Time inside feels suspended. The chamber does not direct attention upward or outward. it holds it inward. Maishao's design reflects confidence rather than experimentation. The builders understood stone, balance, and alignment well enough to commit fully to the structure they envisioned. There's no evidence of collapse, redesign, or correction. The monument stands because it was completed as intended. The cairn does not dominate its surroundings through height. It integrates into them. Its grassy mound mirrors the rolling land. Only its form reveals intention. This restraint distinguishes Maisho from later monumental traditions that emphasize visibility and scale. Here, power is quiet. The monument records a worldview in which architecture served as a mediator between landscape, time, and ritual, rather than display or authority. Stone was used to hold moments rather than proclaim identity. The builders left no inscriptions, no names, no explanations. They left alignment. They left space. They left a structure that performs its meaning only when conditions are right. Maisho remains one of the clearest examples of prehistoric architecture designed not for permanence alone, but for return. It does not reveal itself fully at once. It waits. As the 13th chapter of this journey, Maisho deepens the exploration of how ancient societies use stone to shape experience rather than spectacle. It shows how architecture can be silent yet exact, restrained yet precise. The cairn still rests in the open Orkney landscape, unchanged in form even as centuries pass around it. And when the winter sun reaches its lowest point, the light still enters briefly, reminding us that some structures were built not to stand against time, but to meet it.